My wealthy aunt bequeathed me $5 million. The very parents who had callously abandoned me at a bus stop 2 decades prior unexpectedly materialized at the reading of the will. They informed the attorney that I was emotionally unstable and that they intended to initiate conservatorship proceedings to safeguard me and my inheritance. They smirked, believing they had me cornered. Unbeknownst to them, my aunt had bequeathed me one final secret weapon. It wasn't financial. It was a small black notebook, and the instant my lawyer opened it, their smug expressions vanished forever. Before I reveal the contents of that notebook, please share in the comments where you are tuning in from. And if you've ever found yourself in a struggle with family over what rightfully belongs to you, kindly hit that like button and subscribe. You won't want to miss what unfolds next. The atmosphere in Mr. Henderson's office was heavy and oppressive. It carried the scent of aged books, fine leather, and a lingering stale sorrow. My sorrow, I occupied a chair that felt disproportionately large for me. My black morning dress felt abrasive against my skin. I was 28 years old, and the only soul who had ever truly loved me had departed this world. I felt utterly devoid of emotion, like a structure reduced to ashes after a conflagration. All the essential elements had been consumed. The office itself was impressive, I suppose. From the floor-to-ceiling windows, one could see the sprawling Atlanta cityscape, but all I perceived was a sky that seemed perpetually overcast and somber. The walls were adorned with an array of diplomas and certifications, a testament to Mr. Henderson's considerable achievements. However, none of it held any significance for me. The profound silence within the room was like a suffocating shroud. Across the imposing mahogany desk, Mr. Henderson regarded me with eyes that were both kind and sorrowful. He was not merely my Aunt Rosetta's legal counsel, he was her closest confidant. He was an elder statesman, a distinguished African-American gentleman. His silvering hair was impeccably styled, and his suit was immaculate, even if the day itself was not. He had known me since I was 8 years old, ever since my aunt had discovered me, terrified and disheveled, at that bus terminal and welcomed me into her life. In a way that my biological family never had, he was a form of kin. He had been present for my high school commencement. He had offered guidance when I launched my own small digital strategy enterprise. He was a sanctuary. He cleared his throat, his voice a deep, gentle resonance, a stark contrast to the harshness of my grief. "I understand this is incredibly difficult," he began, his tone laced with empathy. "Aunt Rosetta was an extraordinary woman, far more than a client to me. She was like a sister." I attempted to nod, but my throat felt constricted, as if filled with solid concrete. Words failed me. I could only fix my gaze upon the single framed photograph resting on his desk. It depicted him and Aunt Rosetta at a charitable gala, both captured in a moment of vibrant laughter and life. A fresh wave of anguish washed over me. "She loved you fiercely," he continued, seemingly comprehending my silence. "She was so incredibly proud of the woman you became, your business acumen, your resilience. She saw all of it. She spoke of you constantly." He gently placed his steady, dark hand upon a substantial leather-bound folder situated between us. It possessed an ancient, significant aura. "She was also incredibly thorough," he added. "She anticipated this very day. She loved you so deeply, Chie, that she made every possible preparation. She prepared for everything." I understood the implication of everything. It referred to them, the individuals who shared my bloodline but had never shared my life, the people who had not contacted me, written to me, or even sent a single text message in 2 decades. A chilling apprehension, separate from my grief, began to coil in my stomach. All I desired was for this ordeal to conclude. I longed to retreat to my aunt's vacant residence in the Collier Heights neighborhood, to burrow into her bed and slumber for a week. The silence in that house was profound, yet it was a silence that belonged to me. It was a safe haven. Aunt Rosetta had made it so. "We will endeavor to make this swift," Mr. Henderson said softly, as if divining my thoughts. "I recognize your need for rest. We merely need to navigate the legal formalities." He adjusted his reading spectacles. The room was steeped in an unnerving stillness. I could discern the faint rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner, a sound that typically offered solace, but now seemed to merely mark the inexorable passage of time. I could hear the insistent thrumming of my own pulse in my ears. He opened the folder. The rustle of the thick, expensive paper unfolding seemed amplified within the silence. "I, Rosetta James," he commenced, his voice clear and formal, adopting the official cadence of his profession, "being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament." Slam! The office door exploded open. It didn't merely open, it was violently flung inward, striking the interior wall with a resounding crack that made me recoil so sharply my teeth chattered. My heart lurched into my throat, its frantic beating like that of a trapped avian. All the air seemed to evacuate the room, and then I heard it, a sound I hadn't encountered in 2 decades, yet my body recognized it with immediate visceral certainty. A sound that haunted my nightmares. The sharp, aggressive, entitled click-clack-click of expensive stiletto heels on a gleaming hardwood floor. A sound that invariably, unfailingly, signaled the imminent unraveling of my world. Altha swept into the room, and as she did, all warmth seemed to dissipate. She was 48, yet her face was a taut, unblemished mask, sculpted by costly cosmetic procedures. She was encased in a black designer suit that undoubtedly commanded a substantial price. Her fair skin presented a stark contrast to the dark fabric. Her nails, long and scarlet, resembled predatory talons. She appeared as though she were attending a high-stakes corporate merger, not the reading of a will for a sibling she hadn't seen in 20 years. Following her, Marcus, my biological father, filled the doorway. He was 50, tall and broad-shouldered, attired in a vest and a silk tie. He exuded an air of polished success, but his eyes, unlike hers, betrayed a palpable nervousness. They flickered from me to Mr. Henderson and then, most tellingly, to the substantial leather folder resting on the desk. Mr. Henderson, ever the consummate professional, stiffened. His voice assumed an unyielding, steely timbre. "Excuse me, this is a private meeting. Do you have an appointment?" Altha disregarded him entirely. She didn't even deign to cast a glance his way. Her eyes locked onto me, and that flawlessly smooth, glacial countenance fractured into a wide, dazzling smile. It was all teeth. It was the most disingenuous display I had ever witnessed. "Chonny, darling," she cooed, her voice unnaturally high and saccharine. She lunged forward, her arms outstretched, her expensive perfume reaching me a split second before her physical presence. "Oh, look at you. All grown up. It's us, Mommy and Daddy are here." A raw, primal shriek tore from my very being. "Don't!" I scrambled backward, shoving my heavy leather chair away from her. It grated horribly against the polished wood floor, a sound that mirrored the frantic alarm bells clamoring in my head. "Don't you touch me!" Everything froze. The room became a tableau. Altha's arms remained suspended in mid-air, her smile fixed in that semblance of affectionate embrace. But for a fleeting instant I glimpsed it in her eyes. Pure, unadulterated fury. The mask had slipped. She was incandescent with rage that I had dared to defy her, that I had humiliated her in front of the attorney. Then, just as swiftly, the mask reappeared. Her features contorted into a tableau of theatrical injured sorrow. She slowly lowered her arms. "Johnny, honey," she murmured, her voice dripping with feigned heartache. "Don't be like that. We understand you're grieving. We know this is a shock. We're simply here to support you. We are your parents." My voice trembled, yet it carried an icy resolve. I could feel the adrenaline, a frigid fire coursing through my veins. "You haven't answered my question," I stated, my voice low and laced with menace. "What are you doing here?" Altha appeared affronted, as if I possessed no right to inquire. She opened her mouth to respond, but Marcus stepped forward, placing a hand on her shoulder. He was attempting to project an image of calm reasonableness. "We are here," he intoned, his voice a deep, authoritative rumble, "to hear my sister Rosetta's will. We are, after all, family." I emitted a laugh. The sound was jarring, an ugly, sharp bark of pain that had no other outlet. It even startled me. "Family?" I repeated the word, its taste akin to poison in my mouth. "You presume to use that word now?" I rose to my feet, my legs unsteady but holding firm. I met Altha's gaze directly. "You haven't been family for 20 years, not since the day you drove me to the downtown Greyhound bus station, not since you pressed a crumpled $20 bill into my hand and instructed me to sit on the bench and await someone. I was 8 years old. You never returned." "That was a complete misunderstanding," Altha snapped, her voice shedding its syrupy affectation and becoming sharp and defensive. "We were in a difficult situation. We searched for you. We tried to find you." "You searched for me?" I inquired, my voice escalating. "That is the most egregious falsehood you have ever uttered. Aunt Rosetta discovered me 3 days later hiding in a bathroom stall. She legally adopted me. She dispatched the court documents to you. She sent you our new address. She provided you with our phone number. You never called, not once. Not for a single birthday, not for one Christmas. Not when I graduated high school. Not when I completed college. But now that my aunt is deceased, you appear. So I will ask you again, what are you doing here?" "That is quite enough," Mr. Henderson interjected, his voice carrying the weight of authority. He addressed Altha and Marcus directly. "You are not on the guest list. In fact, Miss James specifically stipulated in her directives that you were not to be present. I must request that you depart." Marcus did not even acknowledge him. He simply offered a thin, cold smile. He stepped forward, moving past Altha and closer to the desk. His gaze was not directed at me, the daughter he was ostensibly so pleased to see. Instead, it was fixed with unwavering intensity upon the substantial leather-bound folder on Mr. Henderson's desk. "The will," Marcus stated, his voice smooth as oil. "We are not leaving. We are here for my sister's will, and we are here for our daughter." Mr. Henderson's gaze shifted from Marcus's smug countenance to Altha's impatient one. He then looked at me, his eyes conveying profound concern. I offered him a subtle, resolute nod. "Read it." I was eager for this to conclude. He sighed, a heavy, exasperated sound, and resumed his seat. Their presence was clearly an affront to him, but he maintained his professional demeanor. He retrieved the will. "Very well," he declared, his voice clipped and devoid of warmth. "Let us continue." He donned his spectacles once more and began to read, his voice a formal, steady drone. He bypassed the preliminary legal jargon, the modest, benevolent bequests Aunt Rosetta had allocated to her local church, to the animal shelter where she had rescued her cat, and to a scholarship fund she had established at her alma mater. Altha was practically vibrating with impatience. She began tapping her long, scarlet fingernails against the leather armrest of her chair. Tap, tap, tap. The sound was sharp, rhythmic, a miniature hammer chipping away at the profound silence in the room. It was the sole audible noise apart from Mr. Henderson's voice. Marcus remained seated, leaning forward, his body coiled like a predatory serpent, his eyes riveted to the document in Mr. Henderson's hand. He was absorbing every syllable. Mr. Henderson turned a page, the faint rustle of the thick paper causing me to start. He paused as if steeling himself. "And now," he announced, his voice softening almost imperceptibly as he read my aunt's words, "for the remainder of my entire estate. This includes, but is not limited to, my primary residence in the Collier Heights neighborhood of Atlanta, Georgia, all of its contents, my art collection, and all liquid assets, stocks, bonds, and cash, held in all bank and investment accounts." Altha ceased her tapping. The air in the room grew noticeably thin. I held my breath. "With a total estimated value," Mr. Henderson continued, "of $5 million. I observed Marcus's eyes widen. A fleeting, predatory smile of satisfaction flickered across his lips, a glimpse of anticipated victory, before he schooled his features back into an expression of grave concern. Mr. Henderson took a final deep inhalation before delivering the concluding passage. "I bequeath all of it in its entirety, without question and without condition, to my beloved niece, the woman I have always considered my daughter in my heart, Chi Brooks." A profound silence descended upon the room. $5 million. It wasn't merely a sum of money, it was a bulwark. It was an impenetrable fortress. It represented a lifetime of my aunt's diligent efforts, her affection, her unwavering faith in me, all condensed into a single legal declaration. I found myself unable to draw a breath. My vision blurred as the tears I had been valiantly suppressing all day finally burned their way into my eyes and cascaded hot and swift down my cheeks. It was not a feeling of elation. It was an immense, crushing burden, the weight of her final act of love. The silence was abruptly shattered by a high-pitched shriek. "Ha ha 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 ha!" Altha threw her head back and let out a peal of laughter. It was a cold, sharp, discordant sound that reverberated off the expensively panelled walls. It was a sound of utter disbelief and derision. $5 million! She cackled, pointing a long, scarlet-nailed finger directly at me. She then turned to Mr. Henderson as if he had lost his sanity. The old woman truly lost her mind. This girl, she uttered the word as if it were a profound insult, can't even manage to take care of herself. She's a child. She's a complete wreck. She's undoubtedly already in debt. The rage surged through me with such intensity it nearly suffocated me. "I am 28 years old," I declared, my voice low and trembling. "I operate my own business, and you will not speak about me as if I am not present in this room." "A business?" Marcus scoffed, his voice laced with insincere pity. "You mean your little computer blog?" He rose slowly, a predator unfurling. He did not look at me. His gaze was fixed directly on Mr. Henderson, and that smug, triumphant smile had returned. Broader now, brimming with absolute confidence, he had clearly been anticipating this precise moment. "That," he stated, his voice smooth and menacing, "is precisely why we are here." Marcus gestured subtly to Altha. It was a small, sharp movement, a gesture they had evidently rehearsed. Altha, her face a mask of feigned concern, reached into her oversized, costly Hermes handbag. She retrieved a thick manila folder, the type typically used for legal filings, and deposited it onto Mr. Henderson's polished desk with a decisive slap. The sound was loud and carried an air of finality. "What is that?" I inquired. My voice was small, but a chilling dread began to congeal in my stomach. Marcus placed his hand on my shoulder. His grip was heavy, possessive, offering no comfort whatsoever. I flinched involuntarily, but he did not release me. "Chonny, darling," he purred, his voice dripping with artificial sympathy. You've always been overly sensitive ever since you were a little girl, always a bit unstable. I recoiled, yanking my shoulder from beneath his grasp as if his touch were corrosive. Get your hand off me, I hissed. Altha emitted a long, theatrical sigh, the sound of a mother at her absolute limit. You see, she addressed Mr. Henderson, so emotional, so agitated. It's precisely as we informed you. Your aunt's passing has understandably been a profound shock. Such a vast sum of money is simply, it's overwhelming for someone like you. You require guidance. You need your parents to protect you. Mr. Henderson's eyes were as cold and hard as chips of ice. He glanced at Marcus's hand, then back to his face. Protect her? Miss Brooks is a 28-year-old woman. She is a legal adult of sound mind and full capacity, and she manages her own successful enterprise. Not entirely, Marcus countered. His smile had vanished. His voice was flat, chilling, and tinged with triumph. We filed a petition with the Fulton County Superior Court this morning. He tapped the folder on the desk. A petition for an emergency conservatorship. The word struck me with the force of a physical blow. Conservatorship. I couldn't breathe. My heart, which had been pounding erratically, seemed to cease altogether. This couldn't be real. This was the sort of scenario that unfolded in movies for pop stars, not in my actual life. A conservatorship? I finally managed to choke out. Are you insane? I run a business. I pay my taxes. I own a car. Altha stepped forward, her face a perfect picture of pity. We know, sweetheart. We know you try, but we have proof. It's evident that your aunt was exploiting your fragile mental state. She was isolating you. We possess the medical records. She glanced at Mr. Henderson, her eyes gleaming with malice. The accident from when she was 8, when she set her own room on fire. My blood ran cold. The old fabrication, the one they had used to divest themselves of me. She has a history of self-harm, Altha concluded, her voice a whisper of manufactured sadness. That is a fabrication. The scream tore from my chest, raw and burdened with 20 years of accumulated pain. I sprang to my feet, my chair toppling backward with a resounding crash. I did not set that fire. It was Jamal. It was my brother. He and his friends were playing with matches. I was attempting to extinguish it. You know that. My dear, Marcus said, his voice calm and reasoned, which was the most terrifying aspect of his demeanor. That is the narrative you have consistently clung to. How very distressing. He looked past me toward Mr. Henderson, who had also risen to his feet. Mr. Henderson, as her legal petitioners, we are formally informing you that until a judge rules on our daughter's competency, this entire estate and all its assets are to be frozen, effective immediately. You will not disburse a single dollar. I stared at them, my entire body trembling uncontrollably. They had orchestrated this. This was not a sudden, avaricious impulse. They had been meticulously planning this for weeks, perhaps even longer. They had secured medical professionals. They had engaged legal counsel. They were leveraging a lie, a 20-year-old fabrication, to brand me as mentally unsound, to effectively lock me out of my own existence, and to pilfer everything Aunt Rosetta had ever toiled to build. I felt trapped. The room seemed to spin erratically. The word conservatorship echoed relentlessly in my ears. They had planned this with chilling precision. That fabrication regarding the fire, that 20-year-old lie, served as their key to usurping my future. I looked at Altha. A smug, self-satisfied smirk played on her lips. Her arms crossed as if the matter were irrevocably settled. Marcus resembled a man who had just hit the jackpot, exuding arrogance and pride. They believed they had me. They perceived me as a broken, grieving girl whom they could easily subjugate. But then my gaze fell upon Mr. Henderson. He displayed no signs of panic. He was not displaying anger. He appeared remarkably patient. He looked like a man who had been anticipating this very maneuver. He calmly adjusted his tie and fixed his gaze directly on Marcus. "Actually, Mr. Marcus," he stated, his voice slicing through the tense silence like a honed blade, "the reading is not quite concluded." Altha scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. "What more could there possibly be? It's irrelevant. The assets are frozen." "On the contrary," Mr. Henderson countered. He slowly, deliberately turned the final page of the will. "There is one final provision." He lowered his gaze and read, his voice clear and resonant, filling the entire room. "Final clause. In the event that any person related to me by blood, or not formally recognized, challenges this last will and testament, or attempts to gain financial or legal control over my niece, Chani Brooks, by any means." He paused. He lifted his eyes from the document. He did not look at me. His gaze was directed squarely at Altha and Marcus. His stare was heavy, akin to the impending fall of a judge's gavel. "I have placed in the care of my attorney, Mr. Henderson, a sealed safe deposit box. This box is to be opened only by Chani upon such a challenge, and it contains all the necessary documentation, evidence, and final instructions required to safeguard her future and execute my true wishes." The air in the room became completely still. Altha's smug smile faltered. "What?" she demanded. "What is that supposed to signify?" Mr. Henderson closed the thick leather folder. The sound was a soft, definitive thud. He leaned forward, his hands clasped on the desk. "It signifies, Mrs. Altha, Mr. Marcus, that by filing your petition for an emergency conservatorship this morning, you have, by legal definition, challenged this will. You have attempted to gain control of Chani's assets." He allowed the words to hang in the air for a dreadful second. "And in doing so, you have just officially activated Rosetta's final line of defense. Congratulations." The color drained from Altha's perfectly made-up face. Marcus's confident expression dissolved. He looked as if he had been physically struck. They stared, their mouths slightly agape, their faces pale and suddenly slick with perspiration. They had walked directly into a meticulously laid trap, and my Aunt Rosetta, even from beyond the grave, had just sprung it. I departed Mr. Henderson's office, my heart pounding with such intensity that I could feel it throbbing in my throat. The cold, substantial weight of the metal safe deposit box resided within my bag. It felt like a ticking time bomb. My mind was in a whirl. Conservatorship, mentally unstable, history of self-harm. They were wielding a lie, a 20-year-old lie, in an attempt to obliterate my very existence. All I wished for was to reach Aunt Rosetta's house in Collier Heights. It wasn't merely a house, it was the only authentic home I had ever known. It was my sanctuary. This was the cherished brick residence, the very spot where my Aunt Rosetta had imparted the art of crafting her savory cornbread, the place where we'd share laughter on the veranda, and where she'd offer solace during my nighttime terrors of the bus terminal. It was the sole haven where I felt secure. My new key finally met the lock. The entrance creaked open. I anticipated a comforting quietude, a home mirroring my sorrow. I expected the familiar subtle fragrance of lemon polish and venerable books. Instead, an assault of greasy fast food, fried chicken, and boisterous, grating laughter assailed me. From the living room, the clamor of a sports broadcast blared. A chill snaked down my spine. I hadn't extended invitations, nor had I been in contact with anyone. I remained rooted to the spot in the foyer. I proceeded down the corridor, my satchel held tight against my chest, my heart pounding like a trapped bird against my ribs. Turning the corner into the living area, My world for the second time that day was irrevocably altered. There, sprawled across Aunt Rosetta's beloved cream-coloured velvet sofa, was my golden child, my brother Jamal. Though 30 years old, he retained the same cocky posture he'd exhibited at 16. His soiled sneakers rested atop her antique wooden coffee table. Discarded Popeye's chicken containers and biscuit crumbs littered the floor around him. Beside him, his wife, Becky, was engrossed in her phone. Becky, as ever, was Becky. 30, fair-haired, exuding an aura of perpetual discontent, as if the world consistently fell short of her expectations. They were simply feasting and reveling, as if it were a party in my aunt's dwelling. The funeral had concluded only this morning. What? What are you doing? My voice emerged as a choked whisper. Jamal glanced up, his mouth crammed with chicken. He chewed audibly, shamelessly, then swallowed. Oh, hello, little sister, he drawled, his tone laced with derision. You're finally here. Took you long enough. Why are you here? I reiterated, my voice gaining strength. What is all this? Remove your feet from her table. Jamal merely smirked, taking another bite of chicken. Mum and Dad called, he announced, wiping his greasy fingers on the sofa's armrest. I winced. Said the meeting went well. You know, they mentioned you were quite distressed. Unstable was the word. I believe they suggested you might require some assistance. So here we are. Assistance. Becky finally deigned to look up from her device. Her nose wrinkled in disdain. She rose, flicking crumbs from her designer leggings. She began to perambulate around the room, picking up Aunt Rosetta's possessions with an expression of distaste. She tapped a long, acrylic-tipped finger against a beautifully carved wooden mask from Ghana, a treasured item of Aunt Rosetta's. Ugh, Becky declared, her voice thin and brittle. This entire place is just so dark. She gestured vaguely at the rich mahogany wood, the vibrant canvases, the shelves laden with black literature and history. It's all this ethnic stuff. It's so gloomy. We'll definitely need to repaint everything a nice clean white. It will brighten the whole place up. A wave of cold washed over me. Repaint it white. She intended to erase my aunt. Erase me. Becky then turned to Jamal, a thin, triumphant, conspiratorial smile playing on her lips. The master bedroom upstairs is perfect, darling. It gets the best afternoon light. That will be ours, naturally. My satchel, containing the metal receptacle, suddenly felt as though it weighed 1,000 pounds. I was rendered speechless. They weren't visiting. They were taking up residence. Leave, I finally managed, my voice low and trembling with a rage so profound and frigid it unnerved me. Both of you depart my house immediately. Jamal emitted a short, barking laugh. Nah, we can't do that. Becky moved to his side, patting his arm, the pair of them a united front against me. Your parents were very clear, Chie, she stated, her voice saturated with a saccharine, disingenuous pity. You're not well. You can't be left to your own devices. You might do something rash. She appraised me with a smug, diminutive smile. We're here to keep an eye on you. You should probably just get accustomed to it. We're here to stay, at least until your parents officially take control. The fury that surged through me was so icy and pure it nearly made me lightheaded. My hands, still gripping the satchel with the metal box, quivered, not from apprehension but from sheer, unadulterated ire. Remove yourselves, I repeated, my voice dangerously subdued. Both of you, take your grubby feet off her furnishings, gather your refuse and vacate my residence, or I am summoning the authorities. Jamal actually guffawed. He threw his head back, a loud, cackling sound devoid of mirth. It was the identical laugh he had produced when he'd destroyed my bicycle at the age of 10, then told me I deserved it. Summon them, he dared, lowering his feet to the floor and leaning forward, his greasy grin faltering. Go ahead, Chinny. Pick up the telephone. What will you tell them? Officer, I require assistance. My overbearing brother is trespassing in my home. He gestured towards the chicken containers. What is the transgression? Enjoying a meal? You're intruding, I retorted, my voice finally cracking. This is my domicile. Aunt Rosetta bequeathed it to me. Did she? Jamal sneered. Or did she leave it to the erratic girl incapable of managing her own affairs? That is precisely what Mom and Dad are currently conveying to the court. A cold dread seized me. You knew, I stammered. You were aware of the conservatorship. You are complicit in this. You are not my brother, I shrieked, the words tearing from my throat, tasting of ashes. You were never my brother. You are merely the tormentor who pilfered $200 of my dishwashing earnings when I was 12 so you could acquire those new Jordans. And when I informed Mother, she struck me. She struck me for fabricating falsehoods about her golden child. Jamal's countenance darkened. He detested being reminded of that incident. He rose, leveraging his stature to attempt intimidation. He stood at least a foot taller than I. You still haven't forgotten that, he spat. My goodness, you are pathetic. So petty. It was $200 20 years ago. Get over it. Leave my abode. No, he boomed back, his voice resonating through the hushed room. You fail to grasp the situation, do you not? You are no longer in command. Mother and father are, and they entrusted me with this responsibility. They requested that I oversee my unstable younger sister. And then his demeanor shifted. The anger receded, replaced by a slow, malevolent, understanding smile. He perceived the panic in my eyes. He recognized the snare. That's the crux of it, Chinny, he declared, his voice descending to a conspiratorial murmur. Don't you comprehend the stratagem? You are ensnared. I merely gazed at him, my mind racing. Contemplate it, he urged, tapping his temple. You contact the constabulary. We inform them we are merely present to support our bereaved, unbalanced sibling. Whom do you imagine they will believe? Us, the conventional family, or you, the young woman our parents are literally informing a judge is mentally deficient? You commence vociferating about trespass and embezzled funds from 2 decades past. You will sound unhinged. You will sound unstable. He leaned in closer. You create a spectacle. You endeavor to expel us by force. All you will accomplish is validating our parents' assertion. You will furnish them with the corroboration they require to seize everything. So proceed, Chenier. Summon the constabulary. Please make a scene. Prove us correct. The air seemed to evacuate my lungs. He was right. It was a carefully laid trap, an inescapable predicament. If I remained passive, they would stay. If I resisted, I would confirm their narrative. I was being outmaneuvered, both legally and emotionally, within my own home. I glanced at Becky. She was observing the entire exchange with a smug, satisfied smirk, as if witnessing her favorite reality television program. I struggled to breathe. I couldn't think. I felt the walls constricting me. My sanctuary, my home, had transformed into my prison. Jamal's smile widened. You comprehend it now, don't you? You're cornered, little sister. You have no recourse. I gazed at his smug visage, her cruel smirk, the greasy imprints on my aunt's sofa. I turned away. I did not flee. I walked. I clung to the last vestiges of my composure, clutching the satchel with the metal box so tightly my knuckles turned white. I retraced my steps down the hallway, ascending the stairs, each movement akin to wading through thick mud. I reached my former bedroom, the guest chamber that had become my refuge. I entered. I slammed the door shut. I engaged the lock. a flimsy brass knob that I knew would offer little resistance if they were truly determined. I slid down the door's back until I was seated on the floor, my aunt's name a silent scream caught in my throat. From downstairs, I detected Becky's high-pitched, mocking laughter. It was faint yet distinct. "See?" she called out, her voice drifting up the stairs. "I told you she's paranoid. She's barricading herself in her room. She's definitely unstable." I slumped to the floor, my back pressed firmly against the cheap hollow wood of the bedroom door. My breaths came in short, frantic gasps. Below, I could still discern Becky's shrill amusement and Jamal's booming voice. They were celebrating. They had successfully cornered me within my own residence, and they reveled in it. A profound, icy tremor began in my chest and radiated outwards to my fingertips. I was trapped, irrevocably, completely ensnared. They were correct. If I contacted the authorities, I would appear precisely as the unstable, paranoid individual they were portraying me to be. My hand remained clasped around the strap of my satchel. The metal box. I brought the bag onto my lap. My fingers fumbled with the clasp before I finally wrenched it open. The metal box felt cool to the touch. It was substantial, solid, tangible. In a world that had abruptly dissolved into a nightmare, this box represented the sole authentic element I possessed. It was the last object Aunt Rosetta had handled. It was her final maneuver in a game of chess I hadn't even realized she was playing. With trembling hands, I located the small key Mr. Henderson had entrusted to me. I inserted it into the lock. A click echoed. I lifted the heavy lid. There were no jewels, no stacks of currency, only paper. Old, orderly, meticulously arranged piles of documents. At the very apex lay a single envelope. My name was inscribed on the front in my aunt's characteristic, elegant script. I withdrew it. The paper felt thick, expensive. I opened the flap and unfolded the letter. "My dearest Chinny," it began. In my mind, her voice resonated with perfect clarity, warm, strong, and brimming with affection. "My dearest Chinny," her voice echoed within my consciousness. "If you are perusing this missive, it signifies that the direst outcome has transpired. It means I am no longer among the living, and it implies that Althea has finally revealed her true intentions." I squeezed my eyes shut. A fresh wave of grief crashed over me with such force it stole my breath. "My sister," her voice continued, "your mother. She was perpetually a fractured entity. She harbored a void of envy that could never be satiated. She resented my accomplishments, she resented my liberty, but most significantly, she resented the fact that I possessed you. She could never forgive me for rescuing you from their clutches." My brow furrowed. Rescuing me. "There is something you must comprehend, Chi, a truth I have concealed from you to ensure your protection. I had intended to await your maturation, your increased fortitude. I surmise that opportune moment has now arrived. You are 28, you are sufficiently strong." I read the subsequent sentence, and the world stood still. "You must know the truth, my child. The deception upon which everything was constructed. You were 8 years of age. That inferno, it was Jamal's doing. I always suspected as much, but that is not the secret." Her voice in my head was unwavering, imbued with a somber resolve. "The secret pertains to what occurred at the bus terminal. Althea did not forsake you, Chie. It was not an error. It was not a moment of panic. It was a commercial transaction." My heart ceased to beat. "She contacted me 3 days prior. She declared you to be damaged merchandise. She asserted you were beyond control. She stated she could no longer manage you. She conveyed that she and Marcus desired a fresh commencement devoid of you. She was aware of the depth of my affection for you. She knew I would undertake any action for your sake. Thus she presented me with a proposition. I was unable to draw breath. She did not abandon you, Chie. She sold you to me. A memory, sharp, vivid, and brutal, flashed through my consciousness. A recollection I had suppressed for 2 decades. Me, 8 years old, being roughly pulled by the arm from the automobile, Althea's fingernails digging into my flesh. "Remain here," she hissed, shoving me onto the hard plastic bench of the Greyhound station. "And do not move. Someone is coming to collect you." "Mommy," I had whimpered, clutching my backpack. "I'm frightened. Where are you going? Do not depart from me." She had knelt down, her face close to mine. Her eyes were as cold and dark as obsidian stones, and she uttered the words I would forever remember. "I am no longer your mommy." Back in my room, I was consumed by sobs. A raw, ragged, silent lament tore from my chest. I had not been abandoned, I had been sold. My vision blurred with tears, but I forced myself to read the final line on the page. She demanded $50,000 in cash. My aunt's voice resonated in my head, filled with an ancient, frigid indignation. I met her at a diner. I paid her. I would have paid $1 million. I would have paid any sum to extricate you from her grasp. I dropped the letter, my entire frame trembling. $50,000, that was my price. I remained seated on the floor. The letter crumpled in my fist. The word "sold" echoed in the silent chamber. That was my price. The sorrow I experienced, the profound, agonizing bereavement of my aunt, was suddenly eclipsed by a novel emotion, a cold, sharp, and clarifying rage. It incinerated my tears. It steadied my quivering hands. My aunt had not merely bequeathed me funds. She had furnished me with an arsenal. I wiped my face. My exhalations were no longer sobs, but slow, measured inhalations. I peered back into the metal box. My movements were no longer frantic. They were deliberate. Beneath where the letter had rested, I discovered another document. It was folded, the paper thick and yellowed with age. It appeared official. I unfolded it. My gaze swept across the heading. It was a legal instrument. The title was typed in all capital letters. Contract of Parental Rights. Relinquishment. My heart hammered against my ribs. I read the text. It was dry legal verbiage, but it unequivocally stated that for the sum of $50,000, Althea and Marcus irrevocably terminated all parental rights pertaining to me. And then I noticed the bottom of the page, the signatures. Althea's was a flamboyant, narcissistic flourish. Marcus's was a heavy, dark stroke, and alongside them, a notary stamp, embossed and official, and the date. The date was precisely 20 years prior, the very day I had been left at the bus terminal. This was it. This was weapon number 1. This was the irrefutable proof. I believed I finally understood, but I was mistaken. I retrieved the letter once more and noticed there was writing on the reverse side. But 50,000 was never going to be sufficient for them, Chi. My aunt's voice echoed in my mind, the warmth extinguished, replaced by a frigid, weary anger. It was merely the commencement. My blood ran cold. A few years later, Jamal desired to attend a private, out-of-state institution, an expensive one. Altha contacted me. She declared the contract to be nothing more than a piece of paper. She stated that if I failed to remit his tuition, she would pursue legal action. She threatened to claim I had coerced her into signing it. She threatened to involve you in a custody dispute, to inform a judge that I was an unsuitable guardian. It was a fabrication, of course, but you were content. You were flourishing. I could not jeopardize that. I could not permit them to subject you to such an ordeal. The letter continued. It was blackmail, pure and unadulterated. Thus I paid. I paid to ensure their silence. I paid to keep you secure, and once they realized I would comply, they never ceased their demands. My fury transmuted into a cold, hard stone within my stomach. I peered back into the box. Beneath where the contract had resided, I found a small, unassuming black ledger. It resembled something one might use for balancing a checkbook. I opened it. My eyes widened. It was my aunt's impeccable, meticulous script. The entire book was filled. Every single page contained an entry. There were columns, date, amount, reason. My hands were steady as I read the initial entry. May 10th, 2011, amount $15,000. Reason, Jamal's college tuition. I turned the page. August 3rd, 2013, amount $5,000. Reason, Marcus's gambling debts. I turned the page again. January 1st, 2015, amount $10,000. Reason, Christmas bonus. Altha's hush money, page after page. June 22nd, 2018, amount $20,000. Reason, Altha's credit card debt. It continued for years. Every time they required funds, they returned, and my aunt had meticulously documented every single transaction, every instance of blackmail. I flipped to the very last page. She had maintained a running total at the bottom, $537,000. They had not simply sold me once. They had been selling me in increments throughout my entire existence. $537,000. My aunt had been compensating them my entire life to ensure my safety. My grief for her was now intertwined with a searing, purifying wrath. They had not merely sold me. They had been parasitic vultures, bleeding my aunt dry for 2 decades. I believed that was all. I presumed the black ledger constituted the final weapon. I reached into the box, anticipating contact with the cold metal base. Instead, my fingers brushed against something small and hard, encased in a piece of velvet cloth. I withdrew it. It was a USB flash drive, a contemporary piece of technology concealed amongst 20-year-old documents. I was perplexed. I retrieved the letter once more, my hands no longer trembling. There was a final postscript at the very bottom. P.S. My aunt's voice read in my head, and this time it sounded different. It was neither mournful nor irate. It was the voice of a chess grandmaster on the verge of declaring checkmate. Altha believes me to be frail. She presumes this affliction has rendered me senile and feeble. She contacted me, Chinny. She called me 3 weeks ago via video conference to apprise me of her schemes. She recounted how she intended to establish my incompetence, how she would have me declared unfit, and how she would usurp everything from me, including you. My blood ran cold. She perceived me as a dying elderly woman. She was unaware that I had recorded the entirety of the call. Utilize this judiciously, my daughter. She provided you with the means. Allow her to employ it. With enduring affection, Rosetta. I gazed at the small piece of plastic and metal in my hand, a recording of Althea meticulously detailing her entire plan. Bang, bang, bang. A violent, rattling assault on the bedroom door startled me, jolting me from the past and slamming me back into the present. Chie! It was Becky's shrill, mocking voice muffled through the wood. Are you going to remain concealed in there all day? You should emerge. Your parents are en route. They just contacted Jamal. Another bang, this time more forceful. They have auspicious news from the court. Chani, Jamal stated they secured a provisional order. It is all unfolding. You will be attended to. Her high-pitched laughter followed, drifting beneath the door. Auspicious news. They were arriving. They possessed a court order. They believed they had triumphed. I looked at the black ledger on my lap. I examined the 20-year-old contract, and I regarded the USB drive in my hand. I retrieved my laptop from my satchel, my movements swift and purposeful. I sat on the edge of the bed and powered it on. I inserted the USB into the port. A single video file appeared on the screen. I stared at it. I could hear Jamal and Becky downstairs, their voices loud and celebratory, already strategizing how to spend my aunt's fortune. Auspicious news, I whispered to the closed door, my fingers poised over the trackpad. Let's ascertain who truly possesses the auspicious news. I inhaled deeply. The cold, clarifying rage had extinguished the panic. I could feel the weight of the black ledger in my pocket. The sharp edges of the folded contract felt like a shield against my chest. The USB drive was a small, hard secret nestled in my palm. I unlocked the bedroom door. The click of the latch was amplified in the confined space. Downstairs, the laughter and loud voices persisted. They were in the kitchen, my aunt's kitchen, the heart of the home. I could hear Jamal's booming laughter, Becky's high-pitched giggles, and the deeper, assured tones of my parents. They sounded as though they were reveling. I descended the stairs, each step firm, deliberate. My home no longer felt like a prison. It felt like a battlefield, and I was finally armed. I rounded the corner into the kitchen. The scene was an egregious violation. All four of them were present. Jamal was leaning against the counter, a bottle of beer in hand. Becky occupied the kitchen island, engrossed in her phone, her soiled footwear resting on the stool where my aunt once sat. Marcus was sifting through some correspondence, my aunt's personal mail, his brow furrowed, and Altha had the refrigerator door ajar, her countenance contorted in a grimace of utter loathing. "Ugh, look at this," she declared, her tone laced with scorn. She held aloft a bunch of kale. Kale, quinoa, wheatgrass elixir. No wonder she was perpetually unwell. Rosetta was always so peculiar, so eccentric. She was healthy, I stated, my voice, though soft, sliced through their banter like a sharpened blade. All four of them froze. They turned to face me, startled. I was no longer the distraught, overwrought girl who had fled upstairs. I simply stood there. Marcus was the first to regain his composure. A slow, calculating smile spread across his features. He placed the mail on the counter. "Ah, Chie, there you are, my dear," he boomed, approaching me. "We were merely celebrating. We have truly marvelous news." He attempted to place an arm around my shoulder, but I took a firm step back. He faltered for an instant, then his smile widened. "We've just concluded our business at the attorney's office," he announced, clasping his hands before him with an air of paternal pride. "The judge has reviewed our urgent plea. He concurs that you are in a precarious state. He is expediting the hearing. It will take place next week." And Althea interjected, forcefully closing the refrigerator door, her eyes alight with triumph. "He has granted us provisional emergency guardianship." I merely observed them. I allowed the silence to linger. "What does that signify?" Althea emitted a brief, condescending chuckle. "Oh, dearest, in simple terms you can grasp, it means that until the judge has personally assessed you, not a single financial transaction can occur without our sanction. You cannot sign a check. You cannot utilize a credit card. You cannot even settle the utility bill." She gestured expansively around the opulent kitchen. "Everything is frozen under our dominion, for your own welfare, naturally." Jamal, still propped against the counter, raised his beer bottle in a toast. "See? Excellent tidings," he sneered. "I foretold it. You ought to be amicable with us, little sibling." He patted his own pocket. "Perhaps if you are compliant, you understand. A well-behaved young lady. Mother and father will provide you with a modest stipend from your own funds." He and Becky erupted in laughter. The four of them stood there, a united front of avarice, their expressions smug and victorious. They believed they had prevailed. They were convinced they had crushed my spirit. They were anticipating my tears, my screams, my breakdown, which would validate their assumptions. I remained quiet. I permitted them to savor their moment. Then I leisurely walked past them. I proceeded to the sturdy butcher block island at the center of the room. It was the heart of the dwelling. It was where Aunt Rosetta and I had prepared dough for confections, where we had snapped green beans, where we had conversed for extended periods. I reached into my pocket. I withdrew the small, unassuming black ledger. I placed it upon the wooden surface. The sound of the book meeting the wood was not pronounced. It was a soft, solid, weighty thud. Yet in that space it resounded like a discharged firearm. All four of them ceased their mirth. Instantly their smiles solidified. All eyes darted downwards to that diminutive black volume. They possessed no inkling of its nature, but they understood in that singular second that the dynamics had irrevocably shifted. The quartet of them gazed at the compact black book on the island. The quiet in the kitchen became suddenly overwhelming. The smirks had vanished, supplanted by a confused, weary tension. Jamal, for the first time, appeared uncertain. He set his beer bottle down. "What is that?" Althea finally inquired, her voice sharp and suspicious. "More of your aunt's peculiar writings?" Jamal let out a nervous chuckle, attempting to regain his swagger. "What did she bequeath you? Her journal? How pathetic. Chinny, listen, simply accept the stipend. Behave yourself." I raised my gaze from the book. I did not look at Altha or Marcus. My eyes fixed directly on my brother Jamal. "A stipend?" I echoed, my voice subdued but carrying across the room. "You mean like the stipend Aunt Rosetta has been providing you, mother and father, for the past 2 decades? Althea's face stiffened. What are you insinuating? Don't be preposterous." "I am not," I asserted. I placed my palm flat upon the cover of the black book. "Aunt Rosetta was exceptionally diligent. I am employing Mr. Henderson's terminology. It felt fitting. She meticulously documented everything." I opened the ledger. The aged paper rustled faintly. I turned to the inaugural page. "Let us ascertain," I commented, my tone conversational, as though reciting a shopping list. "Here is the initial substantial sum, May 10th, 2011, the sum of $15,000. I glanced at Jamal. "The reason? Jamal's private college tuition." Jamal froze, his complexion drained of color. Becky, who had been observing from her perch on the stool, let out a small laugh. "What? $15,000? Jamal, you informed me your parents funded your university education." "Be quiet, Becky," Jamal mumbled, his gaze fixed on the book. "Oh, but they did provide the funds," I continued, turning the page. "Or at least they accepted the remuneration for it. However, let us proceed. This is a family matter after all." I addressed Marcus. "Father, you are also accounted for here. August 3rd, 2013, the sum of $5,000. The reason? To cover Marcus's gambling indiscretions." Becky gasped. This time it was not amusement. She slid off the stool, her expression a tableau of bewilderment and indignation. "Gambling debts? Jamal, what is she proclaiming?" "Your father does not gamble," I stated. "Be quiet, Becky," Jamal bellowed, his voice cracking. "She is fabricating. It is all a fabrication." "Is it?" I inquired calmly. "The bank transfer records are all held at my attorney's office, but this is a remarkably thorough abstract." I turned another leaf, addressing Althea. Her face had become ashen. Here we are, Mother, June 22nd, 2018. The sum $20,000. Remarkable. The reason? To settle Althea's outstanding retail credit card liabilities." Becky whispered, her eyes wide. She surveyed Althea's designer attire, her costly handbag. The pieces were finally falling into place. "Jamal, you told me your mother was financially astute. You claimed that was an inheritance. It is not solely that, I stated, leafing through page after page, allowing them to perceive the unending columns of figures. It is all documented. January 1st, 2015, $10,000. Reason, Christmas bonus, Althea's hush money. March 30th, 2019, $7,000. Reason, Jamal's automobile repairs. Becky's voice trembled. Jamal, we paid for those automobile repairs. I paid for them. I used my bonus. Where did that $7,000 go? Jamal merely stared at her, his mouth opening and closing, utterly speechless. I closed the book with a soft, conclusive thud. The total, I declared, my voice echoing in the profound quiet of the kitchen, amounts to $537,000. A stipend. My aunt has been subsidizing you my entire existence. Blackmail. Truly, to keep you distant from me, to ensure your silence? Becky turned on Jamal, her face bleached with fury. You deceived me. All this time you have been extorting funds from this impoverished elderly woman. You painted her as the deranged one. You proclaimed your family was prosperous. Be silent, Becky, Jamal roared, his panic finally erupting into rage. Marcus had remained quiescent, his face a mask of disbelief and dismay. But now he stirred. He lunged across the kitchen island, his hand extended, his eyes wild. Give me that book, he bellowed, his voice a desperate snarl. You impudent child, you concocted that. You are deceiving us. He clawed for the book, his fingers mere inches from its cover. Do not touch me, I shrieked, my voice sharp and forceful. He recoiled, startled by my sudden ferocity. I took a step back, my gaze locked onto his. It is inconsequential. It is all corroborated. It has all been digitized. My legal counsel possesses the originals of every bank transfer. This, I declared, holding aloft the small black book, is merely a replica, my copy. Marcus's countenance was a tableau of fury and incredulity. Becky was fixated on Jamal, her eyes wide with betrayal. Gambling debts. You lied to me. You have been deceiving our entire family. Be quiet, Becky. Jamal's voice cracked with panic. He looked pleadingly at Althea and Marcus. Mother, father, do something. She is irrational. She is fabricating all of this. Althea, who had been frozen in place, her face pallid, finally reacted, her eyes, previously wide with shock, narrowing into slits of pure animosity. Irrational, she shrieked, her voice escalating. Naturally she is. She is precisely like my sister, deceitful, manipulative. She is a liar. She took a step toward me, her finger pointed accusingly at my face. And so what? So what if Rosetta provided us with funds? She was indebted to us. She was indebted to us for what she perpetrated. The kitchen fell silent. I simply stared at her. I uttered no word. I allowed her to speak. I let her entrench herself further. She felt guilt. Althea continued, desperately seeking a justification. She knew she was in the wrong. She knew she had no claim. She deprived me of my daughter. There it was, the word, the single word my aunt had awaited 2 decades for her to utter. Deprived, I whispered. The room was so still I could discern the hum of the refrigerator. Deprived, I repeated, louder this time. I allowed the black ledger to fall from my grasp onto the kitchen island. It was no longer pertinent. It was merely the prelude. Is that your interpretation? Althea, stealing? I reached into the front pocket of my jeans. My fingers closed around the thick, folded document. The contract. Weapon number 2. I withdrew it. Marcus noticed it. His eyes widened in horrified recognition. He comprehended its nature. He attempted to speak. Althea, wait. But it was too late. I unfolded the yellowed 20-year-old paper. I held it aloft for them all to see, the notary seal and the bold printed title facing them. Or is it this? I queried, my voice frigid and clear, that you term it a contract of parental rights relinquishment. Altha stopped breathing, her eyes locked on the paper. She was unable to speak. $50,000. Silence. That was the price, my price. $50,000 in cash in exchange for your permanent surrender of all legal claims. To me, that, mother, was not theft. That was a transaction. Marcus stumbled backward as if physically propelled. He leaned against the counter, his complexion a sickly grey. He recollected signing it. Altha merely stared, her mouth opening and closing, but no sound emerged. She was ensnared. Becky's jaw had dropped. I maintained the silence for a protracted, agonizing moment. I observed her mind racing, watched her attempt to concoct another falsehood, another escape. Finally, she found her voice. It was not a shout. It was a low, desperate, venomous hiss. You believe you are astute, do you not? She spat at me. You imagine that flimsy document holds any weight? It is valueless. It is merely a piece of paper. She moved closer, her confidence returning with a desperate, feigned bravado. We are your parents. That is biology. That is an undeniable fact. And the court will invariably side with us over you. They will not perceive a contract. They will see an unstable, paranoid, grieving young woman lashing out, fabricating wild, fantastical narratives to besmirch the very parents who are merely endeavoring to assist her. You have no comprehension of your actions. That is a remarkably intriguing legal hypothesis, I responded. My voice was tranquil. It was so tranquil it unnerved me somewhat. That a judge would simply disregard a notarized agreement, Althea scoffed. He will when we present him with the medical assessments, the evidence that you are and always have been unstable. I nodded slowly. Ah, yes, the evidence. You refer to the falsified medical report you submitted with your petition this morning? The one pertaining to the fire when I was 8 years old? The one asserting a history of self-harm? Marcus, who had remained silent and pallid, finally spoke. He saw his opportunity. He recognized the fabrication and he clung to it as a lifeline. It is not falsified, he boomed, his voice regaining its authority. It is the truth. You are a troubled child. You initiated that blaze. That is the narrative you are adhering to? I inquired. That I am troubled, that I am unstable, that I am deranged. Are you not? Altha shrieked, her voice cracking. And the judge will perceive that, will he? I turned, retrieved my laptop from the floor near the stairs where I had left it, and placed it on the kitchen island adjacent to the black ledger. Then you should probably review this. I opened the laptop. The screen flickered to life. The single video file awaited. The four of them simply stared at the computer, a fresh wave of confused dread dawning on their faces. What is that? Becky whispered, her voice trembling. More of your irrational evidence. Something to that effect, I replied. I pressed the play button. The screen illuminated. It was a video call. My heart constricted. It was Aunt Rosetta. She was in her hospital bed, appearing frail. Her skin pallid, but her eyes were sharp, intelligent, and indignant. And on the other side of the screen was Althea. She was in her car, clearly unaware she was being recorded. Her face a mask of smug, avaricious impatience. You are taking an excessive amount of time to succumb, Rosetta. Althea's voice, diminutive and sharp, filled the kitchen. You are prolonging this ordeal. What is it you desire, Altha? Aunt Rosetta's voice was weak yet resolute. I want what is rightfully mine, Althea snapped. You pilfered my existence, you absconded with my daughter, and now you intend to bequeath everything to her, that ungrateful little wretch. It is her inheritance. Aunt Rosetta stated. "It was never yours." Altha emitted a cold, unpleasant laugh. "Oh, it shall be. Do not concern yourself. I have a strategy. Marcus and I have devised a plan over several months. The instant you are gone, we shall file for—" In the kitchen, Marcus emitted a strangled gasp. Jamal appeared on the verge of vomiting. "You cannot," Aunt Rosetta stated. "She is an adult." "She is an adult who set her own room ablaze," Althea cackled. "That is the fabricated account. That is the medical history. It is so uncomplicated. A tragic fire, a disturbed child. By the time I have concluded, the judge will believe she is a paranoid schizophrenic. I shall inform the court that she is insane. I shall declare she cannot be entrusted with $5 million. Althea leaned closer to her camera, her eyes gleaming with unadulterated malice. "And do you know what, Rosetta? The court will believe me. They invariably believe a grieving, concerned mother. When you are deceased, I shall seize everything. I shall claim the residence. I shall acquire the funds. And I shall finally obtain what is rightfully mine." The video concluded. The screen turned black. The silence in the kitchen was absolute. It was a dead, suffocating quietude, broken only by the sound of Becky letting out a small, horrified whimper. Jamal was staring at his mother, his face a canvas of dawning horror. He was not merely a tormentor, he was the offspring of a monster. Marcus was gripping the counter, his knuckles white. He was breathing in short, shallow gasps. And Altha was staring at the blank laptop screen. Her face was white, chalk white. She was not merely fearful. She was undone. She had just witnessed her own soul, her own wickedness, replayed before her. She had just confessed her entire criminal conspiracy. I allowed the silence to extend, permitting them to drown within it. Then, slowly, deliberately, I closed the laptop. The soft click echoed in the kitchen like the striking of a gavel. I looked at Althea. Her eyes were wide, terrified. "You are correct, Althea," I stated, my voice quiet, conversational. "A court might invariably believe a grieving mother." I picked up the black ledger. I tapped it against the folded contract. "But do you comprehend who they trust even more than a grieving mother? Do you comprehend who they trust above a notarized agreement, above a video confession, above anyone?" I paused, allowing her dread to intensify. "The Internal Revenue Service." The subsequent week, I entered the Fulton County Courthouse. The atmosphere was cold and sterile. It carried the scent of aged paper and floor polish. The ceilings were excessively high, and every minor sound, a cough, a footstep on the marble, reverberated. This was not my milieu. This was a realm of rigid wooden benches, fluorescent lighting, and somber visages. Mr. Henderson accompanied me, his demeanor calm and inscrutable. We occupied the defense table. Across the room, at the petitioner's table, sat Altha and Marcus. They were attired appropriately. Altha wore a demure, high-necked navy blue dress. Her makeup was subtle, her expression one of profound maternal solicitude. Marcus wore a simple suit, his hands clasped before him, his face a mask of a worried, responsible father. They appeared faultless. They presented as victims. Their legal counsel was a slick individual in an expensive suit, his hair impeccably coiffed. He was shuffling documents, exuding an air of utter arrogant confidence. Jamal and Becky were absent. As Mr. Henderson had already ascertained, they were seeking legal representation of their own. The bailiff announced, and the judge entered. She was an older African-American woman, Judge Angela Wyatt. Her face was stern, etched with wisdom, and her eyes, peering over her reading glasses, missed nothing. She looked as though she had heard every falsehood ever uttered. "We are convened," Judge Wyatt declared, her voice booming, "regarding the emergency petition for conservatorship for Miss Chi Brooks." She addressed Altha's attorney. Counselor, you may commence. The slick lawyer rose. He proceeded to the center of the room. He did not direct his gaze at us. He looked at the judge, his countenance an impeccable performance of pained sympathy. Thank you, Your Honor, he began, his voice smooth and mournful. Your Honor, what we are confronted with today is a tragedy, a profound familial tragedy. He gestured toward Altha and Marcus, who both lowered their eyes as if overcome with emotion. My clients, Althea and Marcus, are devoted, heartbroken parents. For 20 years, they have been cruelly and systematically estranged from their only daughter, the young woman seated right there. He pointed at me. They were alienated, he continued, his voice rising with feigned righteousness, by the petitioner's late aunt, Rosetta James, a woman who, by all accounts, was possessive, manipulative, and harbored intense animosity towards my clients. And now, the lawyer stated, approaching the judge's bench, Miss Rosetta James has passed, and she has bequeathed her entire multi-million-dollar estate to Miss Brooks, a young woman who, as we have meticulously documented in our petition, possesses a protracted and tragic history of severe mental instability. The courtroom fell silent. I could sense Althea's gaze upon me. We have submitted, the lawyer declared, his voice lowering to a conspiratorial whisper. The medical reports, the documentation from her childhood, reports detailing a deeply traumatic incident of self-inflicted harm at the age of 8, when Miss Brooks set her own bedroom ablaze. I held my breath. The fabrication sounded so official, so clinical in this cold, formal setting. She is, by all definitions, a vulnerable individual, the lawyer pressed on. And now, grieving and overwhelmed, her paranoia has escalated to an extreme degree. She is lashing out. She is accusing her own parents, these two individuals who cherish her, of wild, fantastical, and profoundly hurtful assertions. She believes they are attempting to defraud her. She perceives them as part of a conspiracy. He turned and looked at me, his eyes filled with manufactured pity. Your Honor, my clients are not driven by avarice. They are consumed by fear. They are present today to undertake the most challenging, most agonizing action any parent can ever perform. They are here to safeguard their child from herself. They are requesting this conservatorship, not to control her finances, but to protect her, to secure for her the assistance she so desperately and evidently requires. The lawyer nodded, his performance concluded, and resumed his seat. The ensuing silence was profound. Altha daintily dabbed at a dry eye with a tissue. Marcus shook his head slowly as if in deep sorrow. They were proficient. They were exceptionally proficient. Judge Wyatt regarded their lawyer for a long, scrutinizing moment. Then her gaze shifted to Altha and Marcus. Finally, her attention moved. It swept across the room and settled directly upon me. Her eyes were sharp, analytical, and unreadable. Miss Brooks, the judge stated, her deep voice piercing the quiet, these are exceedingly serious allegations. Your parents have submitted medical documentation that appears to corroborate their claims regarding your instability. What precisely do you have to state in response to this petition? I rose slowly. My legs felt stable. The lingering chill of my earlier fury had transformed into a tempered resolve, sharp and unyielding like newly forged steel. My gaze swept across Altha's legal representative, then to Althea and Marcus themselves, before finally settling on Judge Wyatt. Your Honor, I stated, my voice steady and resonant, carrying an unexpected weight in the hushed chamber. I am not mentally unsound. I am not consumed by paranoia. I am, quite simply, exceptionally well informed. Judge Wyatt's eyebrow lifted subtly. And what does that imply, Miss Brooks? She inquired. It implies, I responded, that my aunt diligently prepared me for this very juncture. Mr. Henderson rose beside me. Your Honour, in direct contradiction to the petitioner's assertions, we wish to introduce Exhibit B. He placed a small, dark ledger book onto the document projector. The expansive courtroom screen flickered to life, displaying the initial pages penned in my aunt's precise, methodical script. This, Mr. Henderson announced, his voice resonating with authority, is a financial ledger maintained by Miss Rosetta James over a span of 20 years. It meticulously chronicles every disbursement made by her to the petitioners, Mr. and Mrs. Marcus. He advanced to a summary slide. The documented payments include $15,000 allocated for their son's educational expenses, $5,000 to settle Mr. Marcus's gambling liabilities, and $20,000 to address Mrs. Althea's outstanding credit card balances. As is evident, the list is comprehensive. Althea's attorney leaped to his feet. Objection, Your Honour. This constitutes defamation. These are merely personal notations. They provide no concrete proof. The cumulative sum, Mr. Henderson continued, his voice effectively drowning out the objection, totals $537,000. We are not presenting this as evidence of familial support, Your Honour. Miss James herself aptly characterized these transactions as extortion. A collective intake of breath swept through the spectators. Judge Wyatt's gavel struck the bench. Order, Althea! Her face, a furious crimson, flushed as she sprang from her seat. That is an outright falsehood, she shrieked, her facade of maternal concern dissolving entirely. She is fabricating this. Rosetta provided us with that money. It was a benevolent gift. She owed us. She owed us for taking my daughter. In that moment, she had inadvertently confessed in open court to accepting the funds. Judge Wyatt's expression turned to unyielding stone. Mrs. Althea, please be seated. Mr. Henderson waited until she complied. Thank you, Mrs. Althea. You have acknowledged the financial transactions. However, regarding Miss James's perceived obligation to you, we would like to present Exhibit C. He placed a folded, pale yellow document onto the projector. The title, Contract for Parental Rights Relinquishment, filled the screen. This is a legally notarized agreement, Your Honour, Mr. Henderson stated, dated 20 years prior. Within its provisions, Mr. and Mrs. Marcus, in exchange for $50,000, irrevocably terminated all parental rights to Chie Brooks. The subsequent financial transfers, as detailed in the ledger, were effectively blackmail payments intended to dissuade them from breaching this contract and infringing upon Miss Brooks's life. Marcus jolted to his feet, his face slick with sweat. It's a fabrication, a forgery. We never signed that. We would never relinquish our daughter. We love our daughter. Mr. Henderson offered a small, weary smile. I anticipated such a denial, Mr. Marcus. That is precisely why we have Exhibit D. He gestured to the bailiff. The main courtroom lights dimmed and the large video screens flanking the judge illuminated. This, Your Honour, Mr. Henderson announced, is Exhibit D, a recorded video communication from 3 weeks ago. The screen divided, showing my Aunt Rosetta on one side, propped up in her hospital bed. My heart constricted. She appeared so frail, so exhausted, yet her eyes, even through the grainy footage, held a sharp, defiant glint. On the opposing side was Althea, captured within her car, the lighting poor, her expression one of arrogant impatience. Unaware of the recording, her voice, thin and cruel, echoed through the now silent courtroom. You're just dragging this out. A sharp, collective gasp emanated from the onlookers. Althea's attorney, the usually composed and confident one, froze mid-motion, his pen still. Aunt Rosetta's voice, though weak, was firm. What is it you desire, Althea? What is rightfully mine? Althea snapped. You usurped my life. You took my child and now you intend to bestow everything upon her? That ungrateful, pathetic little waif." "It is her inheritance," my aunt replied. "It was never yours." Althea laughed, the same cold, unpleasant sound from the lawyer's office. "Oh, it will be. Don't you fret about that. Marcus and I have orchestrated a plan for months. The moment you are gone, we shall initiate proceedings for conservatorship." At the petitioner's table, Marcus emitted a choked sound. He looked at his lawyer, his eyes wide with palpable panic. "She is an adult, Althea," my aunt countered. "She is not the 8-year-old you discarded." "She might as well be," Althea cackled. "That's the most advantageous aspect. She's the girl who set her own room ablaze. That's the narrative. That's her medical history. It's remarkably straightforward. A tragic fire, a troubled child. By the time I finish, the judge will perceive her as a paranoid schizophrenic. I will inform the court she is irrational. I will declare her unstable. I will assert she cannot be entrusted with $5 million. Althea leaned closer to the phone's camera, her eyes alight with unadulterated malice. "And you know what, Rosetta? The court will accept my word. They invariably believe a bereaved, concerned mother. When you are finally deceased, I will seize everything. I will claim the house. I will acquire the funds. And I will finally obtain what is rightfully mine." The video concluded and the screens returned to black. The silence in the courtroom became absolute, a heavy, suffocating void. I could discern Althea's attorney exhaling a protracted, defeated sigh. In the rear rows, unnoticed until that moment, Jamal and Becky sat. Their presence had been mandated. Becky's face was ashen. She looked at Jamal, her eyes wide with dread, and grasped his arm. Jamal, visibly terrified, nodded. With the quiet furtiveness of vermin abandoning a sinking vessel, they both rose and discreetly exited through a side door. As the courtroom remained captivated by the blank screens, I turned my head. I observed Althea and Marcus, frozen in place. Their pallor was extreme. They appeared grey. Their gaze was fixed upon Judge Wyatt, their faces contorted in expressions of pure, unvarnished horror. They were two criminals who had just heard their own comprehensive confession. Judge Wyatt slowly removed her reading glasses, polishing them with deliberate, unhurried movements before replacing them. She surveyed Althea, then Marcus, her countenance as unyielding as stone. "Mrs. Althea," she stated, her voice dangerously soft. "Mr. Marcus." Judge Wyatt looked down from her elevated position, her face a mask of cold, controlled fury. The courtroom was so still I could discern Althea's ragged, panicked breaths. Her smooth-talking lawyer stared at his notes, his complexion ashen, seemingly incapable of comprehending what he had just witnessed. He remained utterly silent, bereft of any defense. "Mrs. Althea, Mr. Marcus," Judge Wyatt repeated, her tone low and menacing, cutting through the oppressive quiet. "This court has received your petition. You appeared before us today under the pretense of parental concern. You submitted sworn affidavits, including a fabricated medical report asserting your daughter, Miss Brooks, is mentally compromised and a danger to herself." She leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "What this court has just observed is not a conservatorship hearing. It is the unraveling of a deliberate conspiracy. This is evidence of profound, calculated fraud. This is evidence of perjury. This is evidence of a criminal endeavor to defraud Miss Brooks of her rightful inheritance." Althea's attorney, finally finding his voice, sprang to his feet. "Your Honor, I must object. My clients were overcome with emotion. That video was taken out of context. Clearly, Mrs. Althea was merely expressing her grief, her distress." "Sit down, counselor," Judge Wyatt commanded, her voice like a thunderclap. "Sit down before I hold you in contempt. Are you seriously attempting to persuade this court that a meticulously planned, multi-month scheme to present a fraudulent medical report and deceive a judicial body constitutes mere venting? The lawyer sank back into his chair, his face glistening with perspiration. His defense had crumbled. At our table, Mr. Henderson slowly and deliberately stood. He buttoned his suit jacket and regarded Althea and Marcus, not with anger, but with a deep, weary sadness. "Your Honour," he stated, his tone respectful yet firm, "one final consideration for the court." Judge Wyatt nodded. "Proceed, Mr. Henderson." "We have established," Mr. Henderson began, "that my late client, Miss Rosetta James, was a meticulously law-abiding individual. Her taxes were filed impeccably every year of her life. She accounted for every single dollar. We have also established by their own admission that Mr. and Mrs. Marcus have received, over the past 20 years, a sum totaling $537,000 from Miss James." He paused, letting the magnitude of that figure resonate. "My client, Miss James, categorized these payments as extortion and blackmail. Mr. and Mrs. Marcus have asserted today, in this very courtroom, that these were gifts. Regardless of the label, that represents a substantial sum of income." He turned deliberately, fixing his gaze directly upon Althea and Marcus. Their faces were frozen in a mask of pure, uncomprehending terror. "So my final question is this," Mr. Henderson continued, his voice soft, almost conversational. "My client always declared her income. I simply wonder, did Mr. and Mrs. Marcus declare this $500,000 income to the Internal Revenue Service? Or is this court also confronting 2 decades of felony tax evasion?" The response was not a shout, but a strangled, dying gasp. It emanated from Marcus. His hands flew to his chest, clutching his expensive silk tie as his eyes rolled back. He emitted a horrific gurgling sound before collapsing. He slid from his chair, hitting the courtroom floor with a sickening thud. "Marcus!" Althea shrieked, her voice a raw, animalistic cry. The sophisticated matriarch was gone, replaced by a cornered creature. She stared at her husband on the floor, then at the judge, her mouth agape in a silent scream of abject terror. Her lawyer remained immobile, his gaze fixed on the floor, his career flashing before his eyes. The bailiff rushed toward Marcus. "Medical emergency!" Judge Wyatt was already on her feet. Her gavel struck repeatedly, the sound like a cannon shot. "Order, order in the court!" The room descended into chaos, but above it all her voice rang out, clear and decisive. "The petition for conservatorship is denied with extreme prejudice. This court finds this filing was made in bad faith, predicated on fraud and perjury. I am referring this entire case file, including all exhibits, the video, the contract, and the ledger, to the Fulton County District Attorney's Office for immediate criminal investigation into conspiracy to commit fraud, perjury, and extortion. Furthermore, I am forwarding a certified copy of this entire transcript, along with Exhibits B and C, directly to the Criminal Investigations Division of the Internal Revenue Service. This court is adjourned." I pushed through the heavy oak doors leading out of the courtroom. The hallway air was cool and still, a stark contrast to the maelstrom I had just left. Within those walls, my reality had been set ablaze. The echoes lingered, Judge Wyatt's gavel cracking like thunder, the resonant thud of Marcus hitting the floor, Althea's primal shriek, and the bailiff's urgent call for medical assistance. It was the sound of a dynasty built on deceit, finally and violently imploding. Mr. Henderson emerged beside me. He calmly adjusted his suit jacket, his expression grim yet undeniably satisfied. He met my gaze, his eyes now holding not just sadness, but a profound and deep-seated respect. "Well," he said, his voice hushed in the marble corridor, That is that. I leaned against the wall, my legs suddenly feeling like they might buckle. The adrenaline that had sustained me for a week, for a lifetime, had evaporated, leaving behind a vast, hollow emptiness. I was free, yet I felt as if I had just completed a grueling marathon. What? I managed, my voice sounding small. What happens now? Now, he replied, setting his briefcase down and looking directly at me. You live your life, Chi. They will not bother you again. The court order has been issued, the petition is denied. The freeze on your assets has been lifted. In the eyes of the law, you are precisely who you have always been, a competent, intelligent adult, and the sole rightful heir to your aunt's estate. I exhaled a breath I felt I had been holding for 20 years. And them, I ventured. Althea and Marcus? Mr. Henderson's face hardened. That, I imagine, is just the beginning. What Judge Wyatt accomplished in there was more than just a ruling. It was a referral. She has transmitted the entire case, all of our presented evidence, directly to the district attorney for a criminal investigation. Criminal? I whispered. Perjury, he listed, ticking them off on his fingers. Conspiracy to commit fraud, filing a false medical report, and that's merely the outset. However, frankly, the district attorney is the least of their concerns. He picked up his briefcase. The IRS, he continued, his voice dropping, the Internal Revenue Service. They do not trifle, Chie. The DA might need to prove intent to defraud. The IRS merely needs to prove they received $500,000 and failed to remit taxes on it. And they admitted to receiving the money right there in open court. It's a straightforward open and shut case of felony tax evasion. The sheer scale of it was staggering. So, I asked, what becomes of them? They will be audited for the past 20 years, he explained as we began to descend the courthouse steps. Every single cent they have ever possessed will be scrutinized. They will be bankrupted, their assets seized, their accounts frozen, and given the amount and the criminal nature of the income, I would be profoundly surprised if they both avoid incarceration. I stopped at the apex of the wide granite steps. The Atlanta skyline stretched before us, bathed in the bright, clear afternoon sun. The world appeared transformed. Prison, I murmured, testing the word. You reap what you sow, Mr. Henderson stated simply. A single tear, not of sorrow but of profound, overwhelming release, finally traced a path down my cheek. She knew, I whispered, gazing out at the city. Aunt Rosetta knew they would come for me. She meticulously planned all of this, the ledger, the contract, the video. She constructed this entire defense to protect me, even after she was gone. Your aunt was the most intelligent woman I have ever encountered, Mr. Henderson said, standing beside me. She did not merely bequeath you her wealth, Chi. She gifted you a fortress. She equipped you with the weapons. All you needed was the courage to employ them. I wiped the tear away, feeling a new quiet strength settle within me, a solid core of resilience. As we stood there, a flicker of movement at the curb across the street caught my eye. A black Uber was pulling away, accelerating into the flow of traffic. For a fleeting second, I saw them in the back seat, Jamal and Becky. They must have slipped out the side door the moment the video began. They had not waited. They had not stayed to witness the consequences for their parents, for the individuals with whom they were conspiring. They had simply fled. They had abandoned them just as they had all abandoned me. They had even abandoned each other in the end. I watched the car disappear, feeling no anger, no sadness, only a profound absence of emotion. They were gone, irrelevant. 1 month later, the soft scratching of my digital pen against my tablet was the sole sound in the room, accompanied by the gentle hum of my computer. Sunlight, bright and warm, streamed through the expansive, pristine windows. I had removed all the heavy old velvet draperies. The house had been transformed. It was my home now, my sanctuary. The living room, once a somber repository of antique furnishings, now served as my studio. My state-of-the-art workstations lined one wall. The walls, painted a cheerful warm white, were no longer sterile but vibrantly alive. I had adorned them with Aunt Rosetta's collection of stunning African art, the masks and sculptures that Becky had once deemed gloomy and ethnic, proudly integrating them with my own modern, energetic digital designs. It was a perfect fusion of her heritage and my future. I was working, truly engaged in my craft, for the first time in weeks, designing a new digital brand for a local Black-owned enterprise. I was focused, at peace. My phone buzzed on the desk. I glanced at the caller ID, Mr. Henderson. A smile touched my lips as I answered. Mr. Henderson, I was just thinking about you. Good thoughts, I trust? He responded with a chuckle. His voice was warm. I just wanted to provide the final update, Chiai. The one I know you've been anticipating. Oh? I've just concluded my conversation with the IRS investigator assigned to the case. He informed me that all assets belonging to Alpha and Marcus have been officially frozen. Every bank account, every stock holding, their home, everything is now secured, pending the criminal fraud and tax evasion charges. Wow, I breathed softly. It's truly over. And, he added, his smile evident in his tone, there's one more piece of news. They traced the financial trail from your aunt's ledger, beginning with that initial tuition payment. They flagged it as the foundational capital for the entire extortion scheme. My breath hitched. What does that mean? It means, he explained, that because Jamal was the recipient of those funds and an active participant in the conspiracy, he has been officially designated as a co-conspirator. As of 9 this morning, the IRS has also frozen his primary bank accounts. The final loose end, the golden child, the one who had stood in this very room and told me I was trapped. He hadn't escaped. Thank you, Mr. Henderson, I said, a feeling of pure, unburdened freedom washing over me. Thank you for everything. You did the arduous work, Chi, he replied. You simply required the necessary instruments. Enjoy your life. You have unequivocally earned it. We exchanged farewells and I disconnected the call. It was completely over. I turned in my chair and looked at my desk. Beside my monitor sat the small framed photograph of Aunt Rosetta that had once graced Mr. Henderson's desk. He had given it to me. She was smiling, her eyes alight with life and laughter. I reached out and gently touched the glass. I am free, Auntie, I whispered to the photograph. They are gone. You were right. You prepared me for everything. You gave me the weapons to save myself. I turned back to my work, a new design, a fresh idea, a new life, and for the first time I smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile, and resumed my task. The most potent defense against those who seek to define you with falsehoods is to arm yourself with irrefutable truth. This narrative illustrates that while avarice and deceit may construct an imposing illusion, it inevitably crumbles when confronted with stark, undeniable evidence. True fortitude lies not merely in enduring hardship, but in possessing the courage to wield the instruments, a contract, a ledger, a recording that those who truly cherished you left behind. Authentic love does more than nurture. It shields and empowers you to triumph in your own battles, even in the absence of physical presence. Have you ever unearthed a secret arsenal from your past that granted you the strength to secure your future? Has anyone ever believed in you so profoundly that they safeguarded you even from beyond their presence? I would be eager to hear your experiences in the comments section below.